What is up? What is going on, everybody? I am back with another Seahawks Mariners, a little bit of everything video for your viewing pleasure on this Monday morning afternoon. Hope you guys are all having a great holiday season so far. Hope you're getting to spend it with friends, family, loved ones, and enjoying it and not letting some of the frustrations with our sports teams bring you down too much. A couple weeks ago, not a couple weeks ago, I think last week, I asked you guys for some video ideas. If you guys had anything you wanted to see me do or talk about, and you guys submitted some great questions. I don't know if there's enough to do like a whole video on each topic. So essentially what I'm going to do is make your guys' video topics into one big video and kind of do it as a Q&A as best as possible. This will probably be a pretty long video. So grab the popcorn, grab the soda, the water, whatever you need. Sit back and just, listen to what I've got to say. Hope you enjoy it. Yeah, and we'll go from there. Before I get started, do me a favor, hit the like button and the sub button. Two free, easy ways to help support my channel. Think about becoming a channel member. I am going to be more consistent with 2-3 times a month having members only videos up, may get a little more insight to some of my takes. And then once baseball season starts, you've got members only live streams. I have contest giveaways. The more members I can get, the bigger the giveaways can be for those contests. We've done some pretty cool things already. That doesn't mean there won't be plenty of non-member live streams as well. There's going to be live streams for everybody, but there will be some members only live streams. And those are kind of fun because it's just a more, we get to interact more with each other. When there's a full live stream, it's hard to get to all the comments and everything like that. So you get the cool little badge by your name, and you get priority responses on comments and videos as well. I try to always respond to channel members if they have a question on the video. So let's get into it. I think I've got about 7 or 8 questions that you guys asked here. Going to dive into all of them as best as I can. There's going to, like I said, there's going to be Mariners. There's going to be Seahawks in this video. There's going to be a whole bunch of stuff. So hopefully it's what you guys are looking for. So we'll start with the first one. Daniel asks, if you could make a video explaining why the Mariners ownership enjoys traumatizing the fans, I would appreciate it. Keep up the good work, man. Love your videos, Daniel. Appreciate the kind comment and the kind words. If I had an answer for that, man, I'd hopefully be working in the Mariners front office. My guess is this. I know they were very profitable, or what was it in 2022? They're like the most profitable organization, but that's based on baseball dollars and cents. Owning sports teams does not have great margins in terms of profit. Even like if you guys saw my live stream with Rooftop last week, like he mentioned it, usually it's something more of a side. Like you make your money from your business and you buy a sports team because you love the team. Jerry Jones probably doesn't make a ton of money off the Dallas Cowboys, but Jerry Jones loves football and, wants the Dallas Cowboys to win. So he owns the Dallas Cowboys. Paul Allen probably didn't make a ton of money off the Seattle Seahawks, but he loves the game, loved the sport, and went with the Seattle Seahawks. I'm going to be honest, it's probably going to be controversial. I don't think the Mariners ownership group wants the team to lose. I think they want to win. Listen, winning is better, right? If they're all about the bottom line, as everybody says, then they would want the team to win. I don't think they have as much money to spend as people think they do. I think they are. I think John Stanton is, and this ownership group is middle of the pack in terms of dollars that they have to spend. Now, listen, I think they should get out if they can't do it and they can't consistently put a winner on the table. I shouldn't say that because the Mariners have been pretty good the last few years, but if they can't do what needs to be done to put this team over the top, they should sell it to someone that can make the moves, that is willing to put this team over the top, because it is a good core. It's what's so frustrating for me with this ownership group is I think the Mariners core is really good, and I do think it can win a World Series, but it's got to be supplemented by more than Colton Wong and guys like that, or Luis Urias. And that's not a knock. I like the Urias trade, but that can't be your only moves. You've got to go out and get, I don't want to say superstars, but guys that can fit in there with Julio, with Cal, and kind of put that lineup over the top as best as possible. And if they're not able to do that financially, or the only way they can do it is by trading away some decent baseball players to make that financial flexibility, well, then you're not getting better. You're just making lateral moves, which isn't going to cut it. And unfortunately, the Mariners are in a division where Texas has a great farm. They've won a World Series. They've got a great manager, and they're willing to spend. Houston doesn't spend quite as much, but they've got exceptional player development and a great core in place. The A's are going to be going to Vegas soon, where they're probably going to start spending more money. So it's a tough division. And in the AL in general, Toronto's willing to spend, the Yankees, Boston, all teams that are going to spend money to get back in this race. So if you can't do that, then they probably should sell the team. Now, as I've said countless times, I don't think you just spend to spend. You have to be smart with it too. But I think that's the issue. It's either that or they're just cheap and they don't want to spend. I've said it before. It's either cheap or broke, and either way, it's a bad recipe. So they're not broke. That's probably going too far, but they just might not have the money to spend. I mean, and I think going into this offseason, the Mariners looked at it. I think Jerry was kind of given two avenues to win. I think they could have done something similar to last year where they just try to get the Colton Wongs, the Tommy LaStellas, and you hope they work out and it puts your team over the top. Um, or you can shed payroll and then make some of the moves. But I think they did that and they found out they don't have as much payroll to spend. So we'll see what happens. I think they'll make some more moves, but that would be my best guess on it. Either way, it's an ownership group that, and listen, it's not just John Stanton either. There's other people here. In fact, I'll give Stanton some credit. He's the one that kind of takes it, right, and has to stand up and answer the questions more than anybody else in that ownership group. So it's a group that probably shouldn't be owning a baseball team, need to sell it, and they're kind of in that worst spot, right? That they're not Oakland A's spending where they don't spend anything and it's clear as day. They spend enough where you kind of go, okay, maybe we can do something here, but they don't then spend enough to put the team over the top. So it's just super frustrating all around. But Daniel, appreciate the question and the kind words. Sean asks, he says, I'd be interested in your take. You know what? I'm actually going to do Mariners because that's a Seahawks question. So let me see if there's any more Mariners questions, and I'll get to the Seahawks ones. William Cook, one of my members. Thank you, William. Always a pleasure to read your comments and everything you comment on my videos. Appreciate you, my friend. He says, okay, I'll play troublemaker. How safe is Servais' job? How safe is Pete Carroll? Will the Coyotes and the Kraken make the playoffs? Okay, we got a little both here. We'll start with Mr. Scott Servais. Scott and Pete are kind of two completely different in two completely different situations, right? Like Pete is the Seahawks organization. Pete is essentially Jerry DiPoto being the head coach, whereas Scott is truly just the manager. I think Scott's fairly safe, but if the Mariners struggle next year, let's say they get out of the gates like 30-40 or 19-28 and they're just scuffling, Scott's probably going to be the first guy to go. It just is what it is. Managers are usually the fall guys for things. My take on Scott has always been this. My main goal for managers that I look for is if they can keep the clubhouse together and keep everyone, there's not a lot of in-house fighting and stuff like that. It's where I lost on guys like Don Wakamatsu back in the day when you had Griffey just sitting in the dugout and guys going at it. Like it's time to move on. Scott's done a pretty good job of that, in my opinion. I think the team is fairly close. And I think a lot of their frustrations are with ownership group and maybe the front office. That's nothing that Scott really has any say. And now I'm sure Scott has input on things, but at the end of the day, he doesn't get to make the final roster decisions. And if this team does struggle out of the gate, I think blame's got to go down the pecking order. It starts with ownership, goes to the front office, then it goes to the coaching staff. Unfortunately, the coaching staff's always going to be the first one that's going to take the fall. It almost goes in reverse order. Like it should go ownership, front office, coaching staff, but it goes coaching staff, front office, ownership. When it comes to jobs being lost or firings happen, I'd say Scott's fairly safe. I'd give it like, I don't know how to grade it, but I think as long as the Mariners are competitive next year, he's safe. If something goes really awry, I think he could be fired. Especially you've got Manny Act on the staff. Now you have Brant Brown on the staff. Those are guys that could take over. And if the Mariners miss the playoffs, he's probably out. But I'm curious who else would be out at that point too. So we'll see what ends up happening there with Scott. I think Scott's fine. Baseball managers to me are kind of all the same. And I think as fans, we watch our team so much more than other teams that we criticize. Oh, Scott brought in the wrong pitcher here. But, if you're on that, do you go watch the Braves and do the same thing? No, you just kind of let that stuff happen. You watch the Phillies and they just kind of do it. And we're overly critical of our own team. Every manager does weird decisions and kind of manages the same way. If they can keep the clubhouse together, I think they're fine. I can promise you this: if the team falls out of it and they fire Scott, that's not going to be some magic pill to fix everything, or anything like that. So, well, I'm a little indifferent. I think Scott's fine if they made a change, whatever. But he'll end up being a fall guy if the team struggles. Pete Carroll's job, I think, is safe. I don't see Pete leaving. It's why I don't get into that discourse too much with what's my thoughts on it, because I think Pete will be back. Um, I'm on the fence about it. I'm not. I know a lot of people are, oh, fire Pete, and I get it. I do. I would love to see the next Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, come in here and take over the team. But for every Shanahan and Sean McVay, there's Josh McDaniels, there's Frank Reich, there's Nathaniel Hackett, there's who else am I missing here that's been fired? There's Jay Gruden's, there's trying to think of some other ones here. Lost my train of thought a bit. But you know what I'm saying, right? There's all those different guys. So it's not as easy to just say, oh, fire Pete and plug in somebody. Pete's not Scott, right? Scott gets fired. You've got the same front office, you got the same ownership group and everything like that. You can plug in new manager and you're still doing Jerry's philosophies, essentially. Pete's the vice president of football operations. He's the head coach. Firing Pete, you're looking at possibly a big overhaul. Now, if you're someone that's 100% tear this down and rebuild it, then maybe that's the way to go. If you like some of the young talent on this team, then guess what? There's a chance a new GM, a new VP doesn't. They may look at this roster and go, no, I'm not big on these guys. I don't like this. I don't like what they're doing here. And it may be a complete teardown. Maybe that's what they need. I'm not positive on it. I don't think they do. They're a pretty young team. I think the fact that they won 9 games last year was almost a curse for Pete in a way, because people expected a step forward this year. I think they actually have taken some steps forward, but unfortunately the record has been worse, which makes it tough. So at the end of the day, though, Pete is making so much money. I don't see Jody Allen firing Pete, paying him that much money, and then hiring a new coach. So I think Pete is back. I think his seat should be hot. Like, I'm not trying to come on here and say anybody's wrong for thinking that there might need to be some coaching changes. But I think Pete definitely gets another year for sure. If he wants it, he's 72, 73. There's a chance Pete, could step down as well. That is a possibility. But I think Pete will be back. I would say 99.9% sure Pete is back next year, unless something really weird happens over the final month of the season. Kraken and Coyotes. I think the Coyotes do make it. I do. I like the way they play. They've lost a couple in a row, which has been frustrating. Connor Ingram's playing really well. Carcone's been amazing since coming up this year. I think he's one of the leaders in 5-on-5 goals or something like that. The Kraken, I don't follow as much. I know it's been a tough season. I'll say the Kraken do not get in. They've played a lot of games, a lot of overtime losses, which it's nice that you get the point out of those, but they can definitely come back to bite you. So I'll say Coyotes get in. It doesn't look like right now that the Kraken will, but hockey's kind of my number 3 sport. I know it, but not enough to give a full great breakdown on that. But William, always appreciate the question, my friend. So let's get into these. I'll go back to Sean's question now, since we are into football here. He asks, I'd be interested to hear your take on what positions and types of players the Seahawks should be on the lookout for this coming draft season, given how close this team feels to being back in contender spot. Again, Sean, appreciate your support for the channel and your comment. Thank you, my friend. I think in terms of positions, I agree. I actually don't think this team is too far off from contention. I know the last 4 weeks have been very disappointing. But I do think that there is finally some elite talent showing up. I think you do have an alpha in the secondary and Devin Witherspoon. I think we've seen the D-line play a little bit better this year, getting pressure. They've been better at stopping the run. I shouldn't say McCaffrey kind of ran all over him yesterday. So maybe not the best time to make that comment, but they've been better against the run this year. Offensively, they've taken a little bit of a step back offensively, but I think some of the offensive line injuries contributed to that. Geno has played more, I think, second half of last year, Geno, as opposed to first half of last year. But to get into the question, I think first and foremost, let me actually just go back and make sure I'm reading it correctly. I think quarterback is first and foremost where you'll see this team look, or it's where I would look. I like Geno Smith. I think Geno's fine. I think Geno's a starting quarterback in this league. But here's my take on Geno. I think when everything goes right, the protection is there, Geno can succeed. When the protection breaks down a little bit, I think he struggles. I think he struggles a little bit under pressure. And I think some of those decision making skills aren't the best under pressure. Now, you might say, Jay, that's every quarterback in the league, but I don't think it is. I think there are a handful of quarterbacks that can succeed when not everything is going right. Truthfully, even like prime Russell Wilson was good at that. He was able to mask a lot of inefficiencies on this team. Patrick Mahomes can do the same thing. Like, you look at the Chiefs roster, and I'd probably take Seattle's roster over the Chiefs, but you've got Patrick Mahomes makes up for it. But Josh Allen kind of does the same thing in Buffalo. Maybe not quite to the extent of Mahomes, but you do have guys that can make up for. Just CJ Stroud is kind of doing it this year. I'm not convinced the Texans have that great of a roster. I mean, this is a team that lost 14 games last year, 13 or something like that. They're certainly better with the draft capital they had, but I don't think it's a team that, if you put Davis Mills in there, I think that team is losing 12, 13 games. So that's right. I think quarterback is where I'd start. I think Geno's fine. I think if Geno's your starter next year, that's okay. Drew Lock is, kind of intriguing as a backup, and he played well yesterday. I'll give Drew Lock credit. Thought he played well. I'm still not enamored with Drew Lock, and regardless, I don't think he's the future of this organization either. So I would start with quarterbacks. I think it can mask a lot of inefficiencies if you get the right one. You can go the opposite and say, listen, you're throwing a quarterback maybe into a tough situation, but I don't think you are. I think you've got DK, Tyler, JSN. You've got Cross and Lucas at the tackles. The line's played a lot better since Lucas has got back. Regardless of what you think of Walker and Charbonnet, whether you think they're great or just okay, it's not the worst running back room in the league. You've got some tight ends to work with. I don't think it's a bad spot at all to have a rookie quarterback come into. I'd like to see a little bit more investment on the interior of the defensive line. I think they tried that with the Leonard Williams acquisition. They signed Jaron Reed, and Leonard Williams actually played pretty well since coming over. And Jaron Reed has been admirable as well. I think he's trailed off a little bit after a hot start, but he's been fine. Draymond Jones is kind of an interior, what do you call, like a 5-tech D end kind of type player that can play inside and outside, but he's never been great against the run. It's a little bit of that Quentin Jefferson type player. I think Jones is better, but it's kind of a one-trick pony. And that one trick they're not great at. Like, Jones is a good pass rusher, but we haven't seen a ton of it this year. Again, like all those guys, I'll kind of throw Leonard Williams out of this because I think Leonard Williams is a legitimately really good player. But Jared Reed and Draymond Jones, the problem with those guys is they're good rotational players. Like, should they be on the roster? Absolutely. 100%. But they're missing that kind of alpha. They're Fletcher Cox. They're, Jalen Carter, what we've seen from him in Philly. And I'm not getting into a Carter Witherspoon debate. I'm just saying, like, someone like that. It could be an edge rusher too. We've seen what Nick Bosa does for the Niners defense. But I think they have invested in edge, and I don't think the edge players are terrible. I do think they're missing a Uchenna Nwosu big time. I think that injury has really impacted them more than we thought it would. I think safety is actually a sneaky need for this team. They're paying a lot of money to Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs. So, and I don't think they're terrible, but for the money, I said this in my post game last night, for the money they're paying those guys, they're paying them to be Ronnie Lott, Troy Polamalu, Earl Thomas, Ed Reed, whatever great safeties you want to mention. They're paying them to be those type of guys, and they're playing more like Deion Grant, Brian Russell or something, not quite that to that. Deion Grant was pretty good, but they're playing, you know what I mean? They're playing more on that Jordan Babineau type level where they're fine. Like, it's not the worst safety duo in the league, but when you factor in the money they're making, and I know Jamal Adams' contract is not an easy one to get out of, but if you can do that, I think safety becomes a priority. So I'd say safety, interior D-line, maybe a little bit more coverage linebacker, someone in there, and then I think you could use some interior offensive line help, but I'd be curious what a rookie quarterback would look like. I don't think Lewis, Brown, Bradford is the worst. I think evaluating Anthony Bradford the last 4 weeks is really important for this team. And this offensive line looks a lot better since Abe Lucas came back. Not too shocked there. Sean, appreciate the question. Char, my man, asks, what kind of QB situation do you think we'll be looking at next season for the Seahawks? Char, appreciate your support and your question as always, my friend. Kind of answered that question, I guess, a little bit. My guess is that Geno is back. Um, I'll say this. I do want to see how this final month plays out. Because if Geno misses some significant time and Drew Lock does look good. I think maybe there's some questions. You could make a case of getting out of the Geno contract, keeping Drew Lock, and drafting a quarterback. I'm not team Drew. I'm actually team Geno. If you had to put me, you know what? I'm team Seattle Seahawks being better. I don't really care who it is. I do think Geno's a better player, but if Lock shows he's capable, you can get out of that contract and draft a quarterback. There has to be a rookie quarterback on this team next year. Now, I don't know if that's first round, second round, third round, but it can't just be like a seventh round. Oh, yeah, here's, Alex Magoo, who they drafted a few years ago, or who was the guy they had in preseason, Allers this year. Like, no, I want a legitimate quarterback prospect in the door next year, in the building next year. I'm fine with Geno or if Locke can show something over here the last month with them starting it, but that rookie quarterback needs to be ready to go. So that would be my take. My guess would be Geno is still here and you go with the rookie and then they compete. But we'll see how the final month plays out. I hope Geno can get back in there. If he doesn't, I am curious to see what Drew Lock does look like and if there is anything there. Judah asks, I'd be interested in your take about the Seahawks coordinators. Should they be fired or keep them around another year? Judah, as always, appreciate the comment, my friend, and appreciate your channel support. Thank you, my friend. Really good question and a fun one to talk about. Listen, Clint Hurtt, the defensive coordinator, Clint Hurtt, is pretty much just running the defense that Pete Carroll wants him to run. Like this is where I would kind of be on the fire Pete train a little bit because we've had years of poor defense here and the defensive coordinators are just kind of yes men to Pete. I'm not trying to be dismissive of Ken Norton, Clint Hurtt. Like they're their own guys and they can do their own thing. And these guys know more football in their little pinky than I'll know in my entire life. But for the most part, like Clint's running the defense Pete Carroll wants to run. And that's why when I see people go, oh, the Seahawks need to hire, some big name defensive coordinator. I'm just using example like a Ron Rivera or, get Brian Flores here as DC. That was talked about a lot. Pete's just not going to do that. Like Pete is a defensive minded head coach. His background is defense. He is not just going to turn the keys over to a young defensive or an established defensive coordinator. I shouldn't say young. Clint Hurtt's pretty young, but so do I think Clint Hurtt's a good DC? No. Would I fire Clint Hurtt? Probably. But if you're just going to hire another Clint Hurtt, it really does not make a lot of sense to me to do that. You know what I mean? It's sort of one of those like, sure, fire him, but I don't see Pete. I think they'll make changes. I'm not saying Pete hasn't adapted and they have made a lot of philosophical changes on defense. It's little things, but they actually have. Unfortunately, it's led to them giving up more explosive plays. They were better off when they were just letting teams dink and dunk. Now they're kind of doing both, unfortunately. So that's where, like, if people were to be like, where would you say fire Pete? It's kind of in that. Like, it's really the defense to me. William, who, I read his question, made a point, let's see a little man-to-man defense. And I agree. I'd love to see Spoon just man a guy up and let him go and see what happens there. So, I don't think it's that Pete's philosophies are necessarily like outdated. I don't think the game has passed Pete by. It's just there needs to be some massive overhaul to the way this defense plays. And I don't know if Pete is going to be willing to do that. So, yeah, I'd fire Clint Hurtt, but if it's just going to be, okay, we're promoting whoever the linebacker coach is now to be the head coach, then I don't think it's going to make a ton of difference. Shane Waldron is far more interesting to talk about because I do think Shane Waldron is essentially, he's the head coach of the offense, for lack of a better term. And it's a tough one for me, because I think Shane Waldron's actually done some really neat things. I like some of the formations. I like some of the play designs. If you watch this team run its scripted plays, as you guys know, most offensive coordinators will script their first 15 plays, which makes sense. They can go over them. They can, kind of help to it just when you know what plays are coming, it makes it easier to run. I used to coach some, not NFL level certainly, but youth football a little in high school, and we even did the same thing then. We would script plays because just then the guys knew what we were running and what we were expecting. You could perfect those plays, and when you watch the Seahawks do those, they do a pretty good job. The first drive yesterday was fantastic, but then a lot of it just kind of disappears throughout the game. I think Waldron's had trouble adjusting. I think he has made adjustments. I hate when people say, oh, they don't make any adjustments. They do. I just don't know if they're making the right adjustments. We've seen Waldron get in some ruts and really, really stick in those ruts. Even his 1 year with Russ, we saw that. Now, Russ always had a problem with that. Russ would be super hot and cold, but even more so with Shane Waldron. And we've seen it here too. The Rams game, they came out, the dogs were barking in the first half of that Rams game in a good way. The second Rams game, actually both Rams games, if we want to be perfectly honest. And then it just kind of stopped. I know Geno got injured in that game, so it's not all on Waldron. That's kind of where I also go, I'm not sure. Maybe if Waldron had a CJ Stroud at quarterback, we'd see a super explosive offense. He's dealt with a lot of injuries on the offensive line. He had to run Jake Curhan out there at right tackle and Stone Forsythe. And I think Forsythe did admirable, but then they had to sign Jason Peters, who again played admirably, but just a lot of shuffling. Peters had to play some guard and tackle. Bradford and Haynes have been off and on. Lewis has missed some time. Evan Brown missed a game. So it's been a lot of shuffling on the offensive line. I think you've got, some good foundations there with Waldron. And like I said, I think he's a good play designer. I don't know how good of a play caller he is. Do I think Waldron's like the problem with this team? No, not necessarily. I mean, put up 35 on Dallas last week in a game they probably should have won. The Eagles just went to Dallas and, were neutered for 13 points. So, I do think there's a lot of positives with Shane Waldron, but there's a lot of inconsistencies. And then it's also like, I don't know how to describe it, but when they pass versus run, and I talked about this in a video, but if you guys are maybe a little older like myself, you remember some of the Mike Holmgren offenses, and the Holmgren teams had their problems too. But there was always a great flow when that offense was running. Like Hasselbeck would get in a rhythm, Alexander got in a rhythm, and they both just felt like the run and pass fed off each other, right? You could feel it. It just, they literally were simpatico. They just worked off each other perfectly. It doesn't feel like that now. It feels like they run the ball because like, oh yeah, we've got to run the ball a few times. Oh yeah, now it's a passing situation. We're going to pass. I don't know. I don't know how to describe it, but it doesn't feel like there's a lot of rhythm. So I'd be fine either way with Waldron. I think you can make a case for bringing him back. You think he's done some good things, but if they were to move on, I could understand that as well. My guess is they move on from both. And I think you get a new offensive coordinator and a new DC. But the problem is with Pete, I don't know what you're going to bring in as at D. And I love Pete. I love Pete to death, but I don't know who you're going to get at DC that's going to want to really come here. And, OC wise, I mean, if they're running for a quarterback and get a Jane Daniels in here or something, it makes the job a lot more intriguing. But we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. My guess is that both are gone. Last question comes from Lolo Tav. I hope I said that correctly, Lolo. He says a video. Now, this is one that I probably could do an actual video on. So I'll answer to the best of my abilities. Just be a cool idea. He talks about a tale of two Genos, 2022 Suarez versus 2023 Smith. He says might be a bit crunchy though. No worries. I appreciate the question. That would definitely be something I'd have to do more in depth. But kind of similar, right? Like, both were kind of, Geno Suarez was brought in as a salary dump. Geno Smith was kind of just brought back as a veteran guy. And then, Suarez ended up being the better player between him and Winker in that deal. And Geno Smith ended up being, a Pro Bowl quarterback and outperformed Russ his first season here. So very similar. Then both have kind of taken a step back. And obviously, Geno Suarez is in Arizona now, but it wasn't terrible in 2023, but Suarez definitely took a step back. The power numbers declined a little bit. The slugging went down. And I think Geno Smith, too, I think he's been fine, but, he's taken a bit of a step back. I think we've seen more second half Geno Smith versus first half of last year, which is fine. I think he's an NFL quarterback, but I just don't know if he's the guy to put the team over the top. So kind of similar trajectories for both players, both solid guys, both guys that I like, both good clubhouse guys, both good leaders, I think. Um, both weren't expected to do a whole lot when they came in, and both have. I think Suarez was probably expected to do a little bit more than Geno Smith, but yeah, kind of interesting. Maybe I'll do a longer video on that, but definitely kind of similar paths for the Genos. And I always have to make certain when I'm talking about videos and I'm talking about Geno that I'm making sure which team I'm addressing, because some people are like, wait, Geno. Well, I guess I don't worry about it anymore because Geno Suarez is in Arizona. So thank you guys for the questions. Thank you guys for watching. Let me make sure I got to all of them. I think that was it. I just didn't know if I had enough to do a whole video off of all those. So I figured I would just do kind of a Q&A with it. So hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys have a great week. Like I said, enjoy the holidays with your friends, family, loved ones, or whoever it is you're spending these holidays with. Remember what's most important, and that's not these sports. Although, because you know what, it'll drive you nuts. It'll absolutely drive you nuts to let these teams run your life. I try not to do it. I do my videos, but at the end of the day, it's just a game, and it can be frustrating, but it is what it is. So we'll see what ends up happening here with the Seahawks for the final month. And hopefully the Mariners have some stuff, and I'll have some videos up. Remember to like and comment, subscribe, and think about becoming a channel member as well. And I will see you guys later. Have a great week. Peace.